So the idea about approaching museum design in a slightly different way really came from the last, say, 5 or 6 years of my work with Collections Trust, which has been about trying to break down silos inside museums and say, well, there's this team over here who deal with collections, and there's this other team who deal with learning, and there might be a team over here who are dealing with the web. And then we started to think, well, why are those silos there in the first place? Why are those structures there? And it became clear that we've been designing museums around museology for a long time. You kind of have these big theoretical principles about the museum. And when you turn that around and you think about what it means to go and visit a museum as a visitor, you don't care about any of that. You care about the integrity of the experience, you care about the richness, how accessible it is. But you really don't care about whether somebody's a curator or a conservator or a web specialist. And so we started thinking, well, where in the design world is this thinking coming from? And we looked around and we saw a lot of the stuff that's happening around responsive design. And with responsive design, you say, let's make the membrane, the wall between the user and the experience as invisible as possible. Let's get rid of the interface. Let's make it easy. Let's make it accessible. Let's make it clean. Let's make it beautiful. And what you get is a purer experience as an end user of that thing that you're really trying to get to. And so we thought, well, what would it feel like if you started to design museum experiences online and offline in the real world around that idea, around making it seamless and responsive? So that's really where it came from. I was talking earlier today to somebody about what's the change that's happened in industries. We were just hearing a presentation about industries that failed, publishers and other industries that are going through huge change. And any industry that was built on the unequal distribution of access, they're suffering because the internet's come along and it's just equalized the right of access, so it's no longer privileged. And you kind of think that's what's happening in our industry here. What's happened is that the sense of privilege, that you walk into this place and you have to subject yourself to it, you become less than the institution, that's just gone now, and people are walking in and they're equal to the institution. And so it's no longer enough to say, well, we have this amazing stuff and we're going to show it to you. We kind of say, we have this amazing stuff with you, we're going to find out more about it, we're going to learn about it. And so that means that the really stylized experience of a museum, that really kind of red brick formal experience, just doesn't work anymore for the way people expect to be able to engage with the services. It's entirely a model built around a one-directional model, and now we're talking about a conversation, and a conversation that happens everywhere in real time. And so part of the idea about being responsive is really doing our job as cultural heritage institutions by making ourselves open to that kind of dialogue, rather than simply saying, you will come and you'll benefit from coming to my museum. So I guess the challenges, just thinking about those, are we've got a 150-year-old industrial model here, and it takes more than a couple of years to change it. The change has happened really fast, and the model is taking time to catch up. There are professional identities and senses of personal status wrapped up in this stuff. That we've got people whose professional career is built around one model, and that changes now, and that's really difficult. But there's also this fear that the economics of this model we're working in now aren't clear yet. So there just isn't a critical mass yet of museums where you can say, you know what, they went down this road and it was okay. And not only was it okay, they did better than these other museums that haven't. So a big challenge right now is not that people are necessarily resistant to change, but it's telling a very clear story about why that change is happening and what the world looks like on the other side. And actually it doesn't mean less culture and it doesn't mean less authority, but it means more value and more sharing. So I'm hoping we can tell a really positive story about what happens when you overcome the challenges and get to that other side. To me, a responsive museum is a museum that starts with the user and constructs out from there, that says what is the primary experience that we want people to have, and then how do we construct an environment for that which puts as few barriers in the way of that experience as possible. And so you look at the institution that you've got today, and part of the way of doing it is experiencing it as a user, is go and visit your own museum, and then try and put aside the preconceptions around the structure of how you convey a museological experience, and just think, is it fun? Is it easy? Is it accessible? Is it meaningful? Do I feel like I can be part of this experience, or do I feel like this experience is simply happening in front of me? And just ask them really basic questions about, how much value am I really getting from this experience? And then maybe think about the things, I'm a great believer in starting small, fighting the battles that you can win, and then kind of building out from there. So look at things like the exhibition program, look at new developments, look at, it may be a new program of work in the museum. And just think about, okay, what would happen if we tried to remove as many barriers as possible, physical and intellectual and digital, and just got people to the purest experience of that thing. The problem we always have with this is people then say, well, there isn't one user. It's not that simple. You can't just, let people be agents. And I agree with that, but what you can do is give people the tools they need to construct their own kind of experience. And within that, one of the great things about technology is that it really does allow us to personalize the experience to the user. It allows us to direct different kinds of information at them, to flag up different things, to bring different things to their attention, and then to enable them to model the kind of museum experience they want to have. But I do think we need to get used to this idea that maybe not everybody who comes to the museum is there to learn. Not everybody wants to be improved. Sometimes it's wet outside, or you're on a date, or you're just bored, and you go to these places. And that isn't less valuable. It doesn't mean that it's less meaningful to that person. It just means it's a different kind of model. I don't love technology for its own sake, but what amazes me is its capability to give us a new sense. There are things in the world that we can't directly engage with. I look around this room and I don't know its history. I don't know what events happened here before. I don't know where that chair comes from or who built and designed it. And that knowledge, that information exists in the world. I just can't access it. And technology unlocks. Technology brings a dimension of the world to my senses that I can't sense myself. And so to me, what technology does is it enables you to unlock the whole of the museum experience for the user. That what you do is by putting this window in their hands, the kind of mobile platform, the tablet, whatever it is, you empower them with the capability to interpret the knowledge and the intellectual content of that experience. And then more than that, you allow them to open up their own voice into that experience. So you allow them not just to sense the history that came before them in the room, but you enable them to become a participant in that history, to leave footprints, essentially, on the experience. And so technology makes this conversation possible, but it also unearths the meaning in a room. And that's an amazing thing to do. I think this is really interesting because it's not a radical transformation. It's not necessarily about doing things that the museum's never done before, but just thinking about things slightly differently. So part of that is thinking about where you fit into a person's day. They wake up, they have breakfast, they go to a museum, they go shopping, they go and do something else for dinner. And understanding that you need to be where they are, you need to be in their life, in their digital life, and kind of present. So not just expecting that everybody's going to make this pilgrimage, but that we have an obligation to go out and kind of put ourselves in the way of people's lived experience. Then there are some really great things happening in a lot of museums at the moment where you have things like what the Tate Museum have done, where they say if you've only got 10 minutes, go and see these things. Or if you are an art lover, go and see these things. You create ways into the collection that aren't about museology and aren't about theory, but they're just saying, let's humanize this. There's a wonderful one, I think, and I can't remember which museum it was, but it's the Baby Names Tour. If you want to think of names for your baby, then go and look at these 30 things and they will give you inspiration. And you kind of think that's just human, and it feels good, and it makes an experience that people feel is engineered around them and that they can recognize. And then also just really simple things. There's a great little project called Curator with a Q-rator, which uses tablet devices in a museum in London to ask people questions. So rather than just giving people answers, ask people to reflect and then let people kind of respond to those questions. This is all pretty traditional museum engagement stuff, but so far it's existed in this sort of separate activity called, I don't know, outreach or audience engagement or learning. And this, I guess, is about saying, well, is it possible for the museum as a whole to become a learning organization so that you open up all of the capabilities of the collection and technology and research and say, we're going to make all of this human-centric, human-focused and open it up in those ways. So I think there's lots of the tools we need we've got already, but I think it's maybe sometimes about getting up from your desk and going and talking to the people down the hall that have been doing this for the last 5 years and just finding out what they're doing. The Collections Trust's role is to encourage more people to discover and enjoy collections. And there's lots of reasons why we do that. There's lots of things that happen when people discover collections. But the aim that we've identified is to say this is about a permanent culture change. So rather than this being a project, rather than saying, well, we'll do this in one gallery, but you know what, we'll keep all of the other galleries as this really stylized experience. This is about permanent, irrevocable culture change in the museum sector. And it's about saying, if we start to be open to these experiences, if we start to become part of our community rather than offering things to the public, that means we will ultimately become more relevant, more loved, more useful, more interesting, more engaging for people. And so the big aim is really to look at examples of practice and how practice either stands in the way or helps this kind of user-centric museum experience. It's to find out where people are doing this already and to really celebrate that work and say, well, that's great. But it's also in some ways to do public campaigns. So we have a campaign called Hidden Treasures, which is about opening up collections in store for people to go and discover and enjoy. And there's just little steps we can take, small incremental moves to say, these are your collections, these are your institutions, we are here to serve the public, we're going to design our museum world around you, and we need you to come and enjoy that experience. But also, I'm always really aware that, you know, my mum goes to museums and she doesn't want an educational experience. She doesn't really want anybody to talk to her. She kind of wants to go and immerse and then leave without anybody really noticing. And we've got to enable people just to be in our spaces, to kind of express themselves and do what they need to do and then go away again. And I can't always show my government minister why that was a good thing. I can't tick a box and say that was worth £50. But I can say that, you know, in 100 years' time, the world will be better because more people had a chance to do that.